Hello and welcome. I'm your host, author Ryan M. Oliver, and this is the Mighty Books Podcast. This episode's featured author is Rachel Corsini. After declaring herself a pretty pink princess during her first ballet class, Rachel dreamt of sugar plums and began pirouetting her way through life. While studying to become a ballerina, she compulsively read books under her covers by flashlight and scribbled in spiral-bound notebooks. The urge to tell stories culminated in her graduation from Columbia College, Chicago, with a BFA in fiction writing. Never one to keep her feet on the ground, she traveled the world from Prague to Cape Town. Once settled back in Queens, she dabbled in journalism before working as an editorial assistant for a medical publisher. Seeking a more fulfilling career, she earned her MAT from Queens College and currently works as an English teacher in an alternative program in New York City. Rachel spends her time sipping coffee, trying to cook, and caring for her judgmental geriatric cat. She currently resides in Freeport, Long Island. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mighty Books Podcast. Today with me, I have Rachel Corsini. Rachel, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing great. So great to be here and talk with you and, just get into it, I guess, about my book.
Yeah. So what is the title of your book?
So the title is Sushi and Sea Lions. I don't know. Should I elaborate?
Yes, please.
So I know it's a very odd title, and I get asked all the time, like, where did that come from? So basically, a big contention, like in the story, is that the main character, Daniela, is kind of like struggling with liking herself and who she is. And these happen to be two things that she really likes, right? She really likes sushi and she really likes sea lions. I know it's a little weird, but throughout the course of the story, one of her journeys is discovering that, like, no, like, I like who I am and I like the things that I like. And you know what? If you don't like it, then you're the one who needs to go. I don't need to change anymore for somebody else.
Mhm.
And so it kind of plays a huge role. And then there's also a thing with kind of the love interest, and he's a little bit more opposite of her. He actually hates sushi. He doesn't eat fish. But as opposed to another character in the story that kind of picked on her for these things, and they're, opposites. He's like, all right, whatever. Like, it doesn't matter that you'll eat disgusting fish and I'll eat chicken, you know? Like, so it does kind of play on both of their little like quirks in a way. So that's where the title came out of.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a lot of that for romance and different, relationships. You're gonna have a lot of people who can relate with that, myself included. The wife does not like seafood, and I love seafood, so we make it work. Love perseveres regardless of food choice.
Right, exactly. Sometimes food for couples is like a huge thing.
It
You
is.
know, it is. It's a huge thing. I mean, there's like another part in the story where she tries to cook for him, but she's not actually a good cook. And so no, she's not. She has no idea what she's doing. This was not at all taken from real life. No, at one point I could not cook anything. So yes, it was. And the chicken is raw. And so he has to teach her how to cook. But he does it in such a nice way. You're kind of like, oh, that's actually very sweet that, like, he doesn't like tease her or anything. But she could have killed him. However, he's like, okay, we're gonna fix it.
I mean, how many people has salmonella killed anyway? I mean,
I
who
know.
who knows? I mean, I'm sure we could Google it, but why? Why destroy the mystery?
Yeah.
So what inspired you to write this book?
So the inspiration behind this book, it is a lot very close to my own life. And I think, when I started writing it, it was something that I really needed. I had gone through kind of this breakup that wasn't really a breakup, but it was still devastating. And I was just completely crushed and I couldn't I couldn't function. And also kind of prior to that, I had been through, like, in my mid 20s where I was working in publishing and stuff, and I in medical publishing, and I didn't like it. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do with my life now? And I've had like this moment where I was like, screw it. And I quit my job. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do now? And then I had to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And so I took all of those things and like all of those emotions. And I was like, there are other women and people in general who have like been through this, right? Where they thought the guy was the guy and they weren't, or the girl was the girl and they weren't, where they realized that they hated their current life and they needed to figure out how to fix it, maybe or not, I don't know, or they needed to figure out how to fix it. So what do you do with that? And what are all the emotions and things that come along with it? So I started like journaling, which was interesting. And then it turned into a story. It was very cathartic. It was, I call it, it was like writing therapy, even though it was through these characters. So it was very heavily inspired by my own life and a lot of things that have happened in my life.
Well, that's cool. So basically, you're kind of finding your purpose while you were writing this story.
Yes.
I like. Well, yeah, it's evident. I've gotten through about 4 chapters so far, and it's definitely evident that she is on the path of self-discovery. She's trying to figure out who in the heck she is and what, because her life's been kind of like I said, blown apart.
Yes.
And she's like, well, what do I do now? Plan A didn't work. I didn't have a plan B, and that's very scary.
Yeah. Like you said, her life is like blown up, really. If you look at the story, the start of the story, everything has fallen apart. Her career, the relationship that wasn't a relationship, everything that she's ever known. She has to move. Like it's all terrible. Like everything is awful. And she's a mess. She's like kind of a mess.
Mm-hmm. She is, although it does make for hilarious dialogue. I won't lie. It's pretty. I was chuckling through pretty much every chapter so far. So it's a very funny read so far. I mean,
that was on purpose because I didn't want people to open this book and be like, wow, this is really depressing. Like, oh my God, this poor girl. But the stuff that happens is very heavy, but she deals with it in such a funny way. And the things that she says about it are very funny. And
yes.
Fighting back the pain, I guess, with humor, people have that in their personalities all the time. She does that, and that's how she deals with things. Yes.
A lot of people have that.
Yes.
Work? Problem?
Yes.
Work?
Yes. And a lot of hers is internal too, right? Because that's what makes it funny, because you're in her head about things. That was the buffer for
Yeah.
otherwise how upsetting like the story could actually be.
Yeah, no, you did a very good job of making it feel more humorous than sad, but you definitely felt for her. Like, man, she's not doing that great. And like, well, hopefully the move will do her good. And she's got a great bunch of friends with her that are just, the ride and die girls with her. So I mean,
Yes.
they're there for her, and they're pulling her out of her apartment. Get out of here, put on some real pants, I think the term you used, and come out to eat with us. It's like, those are good friends. Those are good friends. Like,
Yes.
I want to see you at your worst just because I'm going to try to lift you up.
Yes. And that was really important to me because I have a tribe, right? Like I call them like my ride or dies. They're my tribe. And so her friends are, I guess even, I wouldn't like include all of my friends. So I picked like, I kind of went along the rule of three, right? So you have Danny, you have Daniela, Danny, and you have Melly, and you have Trisha. And those are the three girls. And they are, Trisha and Melly are a combination of my ride or dies that have been in my life forever that I could trust with anything. And yes, they have pulled me out of my house and told me to put pants on and, it's going to be okay. I think it was very important to me to not just focus on, because there is a very heavy romance plot in this book, but also the fact that her friends are another extremely important relationship to her, and they are also like loves of her life, right? Like they're not going to leave her behind, and she's not going to leave them behind either. And it's important to have people like that beside you too. Like it's not all about the guy. Like it's not all about the guy. It's not all about the boyfriend, the husband, like whatever. Those friends are just as important. And I think like, women, even guys, like if you've been friends with someone since you're like 4 or 5 years old, you can relate to that. And I think having those people is very, very important. I wanted Danny to have her little crew. And Vincent has them too. They're just not in the book as much, but he's got Carl, he's got Jerry, and they all have their little like friend tribe going on, a life outside of just them together.
It sounds like you definitely need to work on yourself before you can branch out to meet anybody else. And that's just like real life. And they're not going to, it's healthier to make sure you know who you are before you jump into another relationship. Because you're working on yourself while you're working together as a unit. That doesn't always happen. That doesn't always work. So
right.
It's nice that you kind of pointed that out. I mean, blatantly pointed that out in the story. And it's, like I said, it's very funny and well done. So it's just, yeah, she's got to figure some stuff out. Just the antics are great. So
she's got to get her life together.
Got to get her life together. You absolutely. Now, is this a solo read, or are you going to have more books with her as the main character, or what's your plan?
So I am actually currently working on, since we talked about the friends, I'm actually currently working on Trisha's story. So you can read it without reading Sushi and Sea Lions, which is fantastic, but it's told, like, it takes place after Sushi and Sea Lions. So you will see Daniela and Vincent again, and you will find out what, like, the continuation, a little bit of their story, but it's also Trisha's hot mess story because they all have things that they need to work on. So that's the next book. So I kind of had this idea that I was going to keep this universe going, this little Queen's pocket of life that they have going on, even though they're not like constantly there all the time. But the three girls, that little trio, they're all going to have a story. So Daniela has her story, Trisha has her story, Melly will have her story. You'll be able to read them all singularly without reading the other ones if you wanted to. And then if you're interested in the other couples and how they ended up together, you could go back and you could see what happened.
Yeah, that's really nice. You get a good kind of, pinpoint on one group, and then you can, if you want to expand on it, you totally can. So they can both stand on their own and they can be a series, which I think is probably the wiser choice, especially with romance genre too. Absolutely, you want to do that. It's kind of hard to do linear ones over a period. It's a lot harder to do like a whole entire huge story with romance. At least I've found to some degree.
Yeah, with romance, the magic of like the romance genre, which like Sushi and Sea Lions is not specific to the beats of romance because it's also like women's fiction. Because when I was actually querying this book, I had a lot of things that I came back with from agents and presses and stuff. They were like, this isn't a romance. She sleeps with other men. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, because I didn't know that a 30-year-old woman could not sleep with other men aside from the love interest. Yep, I had that. I was told that her and Vincent actually meet too late in the book. Like they needed to meet earlier in the story for it to be considered a romance. So it's not strategically categorized specifically as a romance because of these things. But back to circling to the original question, that romance is very hard to sequel, right? Because it does have those beats in it where it's like you have the meet cute, you have the push and pull, you have the third act breakup, then you usually have the happily ever after or happy for now, right? So if I did an actual sequel with Daniela and Vincent and I was trying to keep to that formula, they would have to pull apart again. And I said, but they're not going to do that. I didn't get that from them. They weren't going to collapse all over again because her and him were so adamant about, no, this is not happening again, right? So I was like, well, I can't break them up again, and I'm not going to kill them. Like people would kill me. Like, I can't like kill somebody after this. I mean, I'm not George R.R. Martin, so that's not happening.
I'd be surprised if you were just killing characters left and right, like in Game of Thrones. That would be completely different than this is not a romance. There's stuff going on, but this is not a romance. So, okay. So I'm curious, like I peg this as a romance. Like that's what a comedic comedy, romance, rom-com, whatever you want to call it. What did they classify it as? What did the agents classify it as?
So I was told, and also my current publisher, they pushed it more as women's fiction with a heavy romance plot. That's what my book is being defined as, with rom-com elements. So I literally crossed into 3 different categories with this story. that was my problem when I was querying, because I had many full requests from agents. I had around, I think I had around 20. And then when they were done reading it, the response that I got back was it wasn't genre enough, because you have to, this is the marketing and the money of publishing, right? It would be very easy to sell as this is a romance rom-com. This is a contemporary romance. But because it was not strictly in that category, they were like, we don't know what to do with it. That was I was like, oh, okay.
That doesn't make any sense to me. Like it's to okay. I mean, I don't read a egregious amount of romance, a little bit here and there with a lot of the podcast interviews I do, and sometimes I'll pick up some. My wife will read, and yeah, sure, why not? And it to me, if there's a love interest and that's kind of the sole, proponent of it, yes, some building up of the main character. To me, that is romance. I didn't even know there was a caption or a genre of women's fiction.
Yeah.
Is there a man's fiction?
So women's fiction used to be the old chick lit, and then they changed chick lit to women's fiction. So, think stuff like Confessions of a Shopaholic, right? The Devil Wears Prada. All of that would fall under like women's fiction, right? So basically it's women's fiction is categorized by, a female protagonist, going through a series of events where she's like discovering herself and learning things about herself and like all that kind of stuff. So in that aspect, Daniela fits into that category. I mean, I'm sure you could have like a male protagonist kind of going through the same thing, and then have it be more like, I guess they would call it contemporary fiction in that way. So I don't know. Listen, I was like, okay, it is what it is, and just you're going to publish it, and I'm good.
Wow, I've never even heard of the different that like subcategories of subcategories almost. That's kind of, well, whatever. It's funny because like women's fiction to me sounds like, a real life, what would actually happen. It's just these people don't actually exist. They're in this little fantasy bubble or nonfiction bubble or fiction bubble, excuse me.
Right.
That's just it's just so weird. Anyway,
it is
I'm glad
weird. It's weird.
I'm glad you cleared that up for me because I had no idea. This is news to me.
Yeah. I didn't know it was what I wrote either. It's fine. I didn't. I had no idea.
I accidentally discovered this.
I accidentally discovered that this is what I write every day. Whatever.
Perfect. That's hilarious. Well, cool. So, I was curious. I was looking through your bio, and I was very intrigued. While reading the story, there appears to be some parallels that you kind of already alluded to.
Yes.
I don't want to give too much of the story away, but in your bio, it says that you are now a teacher.
I am a teacher. I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
And in the book, she looks into
becoming
teaching.
a teacher.
I'm going to drop that there. But
okay,
how did you get into teaching?
So I know, and I kind of spoke about this. When I graduated from college, I was all about books. I actually went to school for writing. So I have a degree. My undergrad is in creative writing. And then, so when I got out, I was like, well, I can't sit in my parents' basement and write a book for years, because that, listen, it took, I know, right? Like, I mean, it only took like 10 years after I graduated to actually finish a book, but whatever. So I was like, well, I can't just sit in their basement and write. So I was like, well, what do I want to do? And I really loved books and stuff like that. So I looked into working in publishing. I graduated in 2009, which was like the worst time to graduate ever. If anyone listening is a millennial, you'll know what I'm talking about. So it was like, oh, you thought you had endless possibilities and dreams. Funny for you. So I did a bunch of different things after I graduated. I wrote for a local newspaper. I taught ballet classes. I was a hostess at a restaurant in my neighborhood. I did all these different things. And then finally, I got a hit in publishing, medical publishing. Yeah, like publishing textbooks. It was one of the most boring things that I have ever done in my entire life. I mean, these people are brilliant, but it's a lot of emails. I mean, you're talking like I'm dealing with like emailing like neurosurgeons and like breast cancer researchers and I mean, amazing, incredibly intelligent human being, but extremely bored. So I did that for a little while, and I was like, God, I just felt like my soul was dying, like the creativity of my soul was dying. And I was like, I need to do something else. I was like, I am too young to be this unhappy going to work every day. And so here we go, full circle. Well, what could I do with my life? Teaching seems like more fulfilling. It might seem like something that I might really enjoy doing. Why don't I try this? So I quit my job. I applied to grad school. And like 3 months later, I was in grad school and I was becoming a teacher.
Well, that's great. And are you enjoying it?
I am. I've been a teacher now for 8 years, and I teach it's called a transfer high school in New York City, which means I teach students, they're undercredited and overage, and they come from difficult backgrounds and things like that. I mean, I guess the closest comparison might be like Michelle Pfeiffer in Dangerous Minds. I'm not lying. And but I get a lot of stuff from my kids. We laugh a lot. I try to make English fun. I teach English, so it all goes together. We laugh a lot. I try to make reading and writing fun for them. And I do get a lot of comments like, because I teach like men. Some of them are like 20-year-old men and very tall. I don't understand. And they're like, some of them are like 6'5", and I'm literally like, 5'2", and a small human. And they'll tell me, they're like, Miss, I don't know why I'm afraid of you. You're so small. And I'm like, well, it's good that you're afraid. I'm like, sit down and do your work.
I had a teacher in junior high who was 4'11". She taught high school math.
Oh God.
And she said that when, ninth graders, we're still ninth. So it's like early high school, late junior high.
Yep.
That the only time she would discipline a kid who was taller than her, which, she's not working with kindergarten, so pretty much everybody.
Right.
She said she'd have to have them sit down in the chair and then she could discipline them. There's
Yes.
no way she's looking at for that long. That hurt her neck.
No, the thing is, right, when they're sitting and you're standing in front of the room, it is kind of like a stage, or it's like a little bit of a performance, and you have to be assertive. And, I've also had students like tell me, like, I didn't realize how short you were because I'm always sitting down. Like if I have to like actually like stand and like meet with them, it's like a mini horse craning its head at a giraffe, and you're just kind of like, you didn't do your homework. And they're like, I can't even take you seriously, but yes, I'll bring you my homework.
A lot of personality in a small person. I feel like the shorter you are, the more personality and gusto you have to have. It's a little bit of overcompensation, but it's a necessity. It's a necessary compensation.
Yes. I'm also a Leo. I think that has a lot to do with it. I don't know if you know any of that kind of stuff, like Zodiac. I'm kind of into that. Like Leos are like, they say like that we like to be like the star usually. So it's very, which makes a lot of sense. Also, like my background, I was a dancer. I was in theater, did like all of that kind of stuff. So like, teaching is just kind of like another kind of stage, I think, because you are in command of your classroom.
And you have to be in command of your classroom because if not, things can go sideways really fast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's especially in the age group you're working with, and
Yep.
Really just any age group in the high school, actually all the way from the beginning of school all the way up, I would say. You have to have some commanded presence. They have to be afraid of you a little bit.
Just a little.
Just a little.
Enough. Just enough. And also, and I also find too, if they think like you're funny or, genuine, and being like genuine too is a huge thing with my students, because they've come from a lot of schools where they just really felt like nobody cared at all. And then they come into to my building and my classroom, and it's almost like, God, you care too much. I was only absent one day. And I'm like, well, I was worried about you.
Yeah. That's good though. I mean, I think that's how you make an impact on people though, is by actually giving a damn.
Yes.
And they can feel it when you're being corny or you're being fake. I feel like you can. And that humor goes a long way too.
Oh yeah.
It does. English can be kind of dull when you break it down to the grammatical sense of things. And if you can, spice up commas and semicolons, I mean, you're winning. You're winning right there.
I've won.
Yeah, you've won, and they're listening to you and they're passing. So that's great. So you're doing great things.
Hopefully I'm doing great things.
Hopefully you're doing great things. I'm doing great. Now, do your students know you're an author?
They do now, because apparently they Google us. So now it's like, they're like, yo, miss, like you published a book? And I was like, yes. And they're like, I'm never reading it, but that's great. I'm like,
Ah,
thanks, guys. I'm like, thanks. They're funny. They are very funny. They're
oh
very
yeah,
funny.
humor is wonderful. I absolutely love
Yes.
humor, and they and kids, adults, men, people, women, they all like humor too. So I mean,
Yeah.
laughing is a nice thing. It's a good thing we can connect on. Jokes are just, it's good stuff, especially in the classroom. You need to do it in
Yes.
the classroom. It breaks up the monotony. I teach adults, and
Oh,
yeah, and there's one guy who I swear to God had the sleep go to sleep button on his rear end. He'd sit down and just out out like a light. We're like, I don't prop his head up with a pole and then get toothpicks for his eyes. I mean, that's all we can do. If he passes, he passes. He fails, he fails. I can't really control anything beyond that. So, are you still dancing?
I am. I am still dancing. Yes.
Good.
I the ballet. Yes, definitely. That's one of my that was like my first love. Like if we're gonna talk about ballet, like that was my first love. I did ballet from the time I was 4 years old. I wanted to be a ballerina. I danced all the time. I mean, I did end up taking a break at some point, like life changed and I wanted different things and I went to college and I did all of that. So I did stop. But I have returned. I take class. Yeah, it's awesome. And it's almost like my meditation. Like people like do yoga or they actually meditate or they journal or they do this. Like my class when I go to ballet class every single week, that's like my moment, right? Like it's I put my hands on the bar, I know the sequence of class, I go through the motions, and by the time when I'm done, like it just feels so good. I'm like, yes, like I did it. I'm good.
It's a comforting routine and it's
Yes.
exercise, so that is very beneficial. Very
Yes.
beneficial. Now, is it a just a class where you go to every week, or are
Yes.
you guys doing like performances,
Oh no.
or just
No, I
just
don't do that
exercise
anymore.
and
Yes.
flexibility and all that fun stuff?
Yep. I just take class every single week. I don't perform anymore. I am past that. The point shoes have been retired, but having the comfort of class is a very huge thing. And I don't know if like any of your listeners are ballet dancers or former ballet dancers. It's a very regimented and like difficult art, and but it's like you come in and you start at the bar and you go through, everything has its own sequence, and you usually start, you warm up your feet and then you go through plies and then you go through tendus and it goes all the way through until it gets harder and harder, and then you dance in the center and then you do things in the center and then you go across the floor, and then like everything is very structured and it just feels good. Like it feels good to like dance and move my body like that. So but going, again, going back to the story, that's a huge part of Daniela's story is ballet and how she loses that. And
Mhm.
it is very hard when you do lose that and it's something that's a part of your entire life, or it is something that you dreamed of and that's the only thing that you've ever wanted, and having to step away, or like in my case, like I stepped away or being forced away from that where you can't do that anymore. It is devastating because it is one of those things, again, where you work towards this idea of perfection, because if you've ever seen ballet, it does look perfect, but it is never perfect. Nothing is, it is never perfect. You're constantly picking at yourself, you're constantly working at things. And so that's also like a theme that arises in the story too, because she strives to be perfect, but people are not perfect. She's been told to be perfect her whole life. That doesn't exist. You
No,
have to live with being not perfect.
I think it's a very young thing to believe you have to be perfect at everything. And then as you grow older, you experience, you mature, you realize I don't have to be perfect every single second, every single day. And it takes a lot of hurt and pain sometimes to realize that perfection is actually in its imperfection.
Yes. Yes. And that is, I mean, like you hit the nail like right on the head. And that's one of the things that she is going through. So in a way, Daniela is a little immature at the start of the book because she doesn't really understand that until she gets further into the story, where she starts to realize like there is beauty in imperfection. It's not, being some, I think one of the references that I use constantly is like the ballerina in the music box, right? Like they're so beautiful. You open it up and it spins and everything's wonderful and it's perfect and everything looks great. And then you close the box, right? And so, but she's not a ballerina in a music box. She's a human being. There is beauty in being an imperfect person.
Yes, and the growth is really important. The fact that there is some dynamic, change. There's change. She's a dynamic character, and you want that in a story, especially one like yours. I'm gonna say romance. I know it's women's fiction, but
romance.
Yeah, it's romance. We're categorizing as romance. We can do that.
Romance.
Whatever
romance.
You want it to be.
They fall in love.
Yeah, exactly. Your story, in your story, she grows, and
yes,
you need to have that growth. I'm glad it's so blatant that she's going to grow. You know that she's going to grow, and if she doesn't grow, it kind of creates a really boring story. So I'm glad that there is growth there. Otherwise,
yes.
like why do I want to root for her? She's not doing anything. She's kind of annoying. No, she's damaged, but she'll come back. That's okay. That's okay.
I want to root for her. And like, that was the thing. Like, I wanted you to root for her. I wanted you to be like, Daniela, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. If it went on for any longer, you were like, okay, come on. Just, you need to, get back into the, nope. Okay. You're going to self-destruct. Sure. Whatever. It's obvious she's trying to turn that leaf. It's actually evident in the first chapter. It's evident in the first chapter when she talks about wanting to find something different. If she was hell-bent on staying put, she wouldn't have been looking into other things to improve herself.
Exactly what you were saying. I mean, how long was I going to let her sit there in misery? It could have gone on forever. But I started at kind of like that turning point, right? Like, she was doing these repeat behaviors and was like, well, this isn't cutting it anymore. I can't keep drinking wine and taking home random men. It's not helping.
No, not generally healthy, but I mean,
no.
we have to move on. Okay, we've stopped at that intersection. Let's move on to something.
Yes, we're going to move past this now, and I'm going to try and figure out what it is that I need to do to make it better, right? Exactly. And that's like the place where you enter the story, is that place. It's still funny, but that's where you enter her existence.
Yes to all that. Yes, it is funny, and that's exactly what she has to do.
Disaster. I call her a hot mess.
Yes, hot mess. Oh, absolutely a hot mess. I concur with that diagnosis. Absolutely. I'm not a doctor or anything. I just like using the word diagnosis. What was the most difficult aspect of getting your book published? Maybe even just writing your book. What was the most difficult?
So believe it or not, the writing of it was not really that traumatic. Being honest and raw with myself in order to make Daniela real, that was a little difficult. That was very difficult because her first go around was very two-dimensional. And I had like beta readers read the story and they were like, she's kind of annoying. Like, I would not put up with her. And I was like, she's not supposed to be annoying. And I was like, thank you for that. So then I was like, okay. So I had to go back to the drawing board and really figure out how she would be like three-dimensional. And I actually won this like writing mentorship. And my writing mentor, Ashley Casey, she is the one who helped me make her three-dimensional. And she was like, you need to dig into the things that hurt you because Daniela is a part of you. And I was like, oh, like, come on. She's like, you wrote this. You did this to yourself. I was like, well, thank you for that. And then that's when it started, when she became less annoying and she became more multifaceted, and that she was, this dynamic character, was when I got honest and real with myself about how I felt about all of these different things that I had thrown into her and just put it out there on the page. And that's when she came to life, really. So that was the hardest. Getting published. So I queried this book, I think, the second time, because the first time I pulled it because it was not ready and I had queried too early. So the second time I queried this book, I queried for about 9 months. And we kind of touched on this. It was a lot of people just did not know what to do with it. So I did get a lot of hits. I got a lot of rejections. Don't get me wrong. I did get a lot of rejections, but I did get a lot of those full requests. But a lot of agents just did not know what to do with it. They like didn't want to pick it up. And it was like nothing about the writing. It was mostly about like, well, how do I sell this? That was the big thing that I was getting. And then the other side was some didn't like the way, because it's a little bit of a spoiler, Daniela has a cat in the story, a very old cat that she really, really loves a lot, and way a lot. There's something that happens with the cat, with this awful character. And one of the big things I got was, I don't like what happened to the cat. This was very specific from an agent. And I was like, but I was like, this is a catalyst moment for Daniela. Like this thing happens to the cat, this light bulb goes off and it changes everything. So I was like, did you read the rest of the book? She doesn't like allow this to continue, but she changed this, like sets a lot of things in motion. So that was a lot of the things that I got. Small presses were more interested. And then so I ended up going that way. That was the difficulty in getting this book published. That was really the barrier.
It seems to be the common thread there is the writing was actually fun and dandy, but the publishing was painful because it's when you go sit to write a book, you're not usually, you're not all knowing on how things get done, and it's a learning curve, and the writing's something you enjoy to do. So you get that done, even the hard bits, like you said, trying to make your character a little more three-dimensional. But the publishing aspect, the marketing aspect, that's a giant pain, honestly.
Yeah.
It can be a giant pain. Yeah.
Yes.
Why can't everything be fun?
My face is everywhere now. And I was like, I barely posted to Instagram. I had a TikTok, but I was like, I don't really know what to do with this. And then, now it's like my face is everywhere and I'm talking about my book and I'm like, all right, well, now I'm talking about writing. I'm talking about all these different things. I'm like, oh my God, this is exhausting. But it is like, you really have to put yourself out there, especially when you publish through a small press. You have to be very open to trying a lot of different things and really just being a little bit vulnerable. So that was kind of like, oh man, all right, I guess I'll record myself now.
Looking back, like if you got an opportunity to talk to yourself way back when, like you said, 10 years prior to publishing, since it took about 10 years.
Yeah. To finish a book and start doing it. Yes.
Yeah. Start doing just that would be what you tell them. Just start
doing, like, legitimately. So I had written other things that just I never finished in different genres and stuff like that. I had tried all different things and just like never finished. So I didn't really figure out who I was as a writer until I was older. So that is kind of, and also like just don't compare yourself either to anybody else and their journey or their career. Because yes, I know there are some writers who are published at 20 years old and they're New York Times bestselling authors and like all this kind of stuff. But you have to be true to yourself and your writing. So just write what you want. Write the story that you need. I wrote this book for me because I needed this story. And now other people are reading this story. So you never know. Everyone's journey is different. And so you just have to start. You just have to start on the journey. You just got to go.
Unabashed. Yeah. Just get it out there, start. And it's going to hurt getting out there because it's challenging. But that's the beauty about writing is you can fix the bad writing and you can make it better and just start getting that experience, because especially get the first one out there.
Yeah.
So after you get the first one out there, it's a lot easier getting the other ones going and writing. And you find that your experience and talent grows with it as well. So
yes, the more you do it, the better it is. Even though it's taken me a little while to write my work in progress, I have noticed I learned things about my process and about who I am as a writer from the first book. There will definitely be less rewriting, drafting, all of that goes into this second one. So once the first draft is done, the process for this book will be easier because, what the first draft of Sushi and Sea Lions was actually dual point of view. And Vince's point of view totally disappeared, especially when I was working with my mentor. She was like, no, this is Daniela's story. She's like, this is not Vincent's story. This is her story. And you need to lean into that. And so now that I've given myself license to like lean into that voice, even though Trisha, who I'm working on now, is Danny's polar opposite. Like she is so different from her, but it is still this women's fiction. Like it is her story. And so I'm not wasting time on the love interest, Nick, that's his name in this new story that I'm working on. I'm not wasting time on Nick's story. It's all Trisha's story. So I won't have to go in and rewrite and delete and change scenes and move things around. I won't have to do that.
It's such a relief too when you finally kind of figure out your path and how, you've walked this trail before. You can find your way a little faster this time.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
So where can people, if they are really interested in getting your book, which I hope they are, because it's very quirky and I'm enjoying it. I'm not a romance reader, but I'm enjoying it. So
that is like the ultimate compliment, right? Because it's like, this is not even what I read, but I like it. Like I'm gonna take that. Yay.
I love that kind of feedback. I don't read this, but this is good. Oh, cool. Keep going. Give me reviews later too.
Yes.
Do all that.
So you can get Sushi and Sea Lions anywhere books are sold. So I'm at Walmart online, Walmart, Barnes and Noble, Amazon. I'm on Bookshop. I'm on all of those. So if any of your retailers, you can get Sushi and Sea Lions. I don't think I'm being sold at Target. I'm sorry.
Oh, shucks. All right, you Target shoppers. Sorry, I'm not sorry. You have to go to somewhere else.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's
okay.
I did.
I looked, but I'm not a Target. But the other ones, yes.
I think you've done pretty well for yourself. You got the majority. If one store doesn't want to pick you up, they're lost. They're lost. Well, Rachel, this has been really fun. I really appreciate you coming on here and talk with me today.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for having me. This was thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, guys, I hope you really enjoyed this. Please go pick up a copy of her book and look out for future installments of Sushi and Sea Lions. And it'll be probably called something different, but within that realm, within that universe, though, definitely go check her out. So, like I said, it's funny, it's quirky, it's just a good read. Go check it out. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And as always, stay mighty and keep reading.
Are you an author? Do you know someone who is? If so, then message me, Ryan Oliver, at ryanmoliver.com to set up a free appointment to discuss being showcased on the Mighty Books podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Mighty Books YouTube channel and share the link to this and more episodes with your friends and family. Thanks for listening. So long for now. Stay mighty and keep reading.